Charles Mazer was born on August 5, 1943, in New Kensington, Pennsylvania. His dad worked at Alcoa and his mother was a homemaker. Mazer had three brothers. Before entering the service, Mazer worked with his buddy Andy in a maintenance shop. They used to do auto work and they had a 3-car garage. Mazer said he liked it. Furthermore, Mazer knew other family members that served in the military. He said his younger brother Ted was in the Army. He also said his older brother Louis was in the Air Force. Obviously, Charles Mazer came next. Mr. Mazer was drafted. Did you expect to be drafted?
Yes. Back then, the Vietnam War, you know you're gonna be called up. They told you I think about 6 months before you were on the list. You'd be close to it, so.
After officially being drafted, Charles Mazer moved on to training. Mazer thought the most difficult part about training was the physical part. He did not think there was an easy aspect of training. Mazer said that he received free time, but that they were pretty confined for the first 3 or 4 weeks. Then he was allowed PX privileges on the weekend. Mazer believed the days of training were rough because it would be at 6 o'clock in the morning to around 7 or 8 at night sometimes. He missed home while there. Mazer also had specialized training. He went to a specialty school to be a wheeled vehicle mechanic in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. That is where Mazer took Basic 2. He went back home for 2 weeks, but then went back to South Carolina again for 7 weeks. From there, he went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to be a track vehicle mechanic. Mazer did not think that specialized training was harder than basic training because it was more old school than basic training. Charles Mazer was then stationed after training was completed. Mazer was stationed at Hanna, Germany. Hanna is 30 miles outside of Frankfurt, Germany. He got there by flying over in an airplane. Mazer did not expect that kind of transportation because most men got to their destination by old dirty ships that were from the Second World War. Mazer definitely liked taking the plane better even though it was a long flight. When Mr. Mazer was in Hanna, Germany, he was finally ready to begin his job as a mechanic in the Army. Mazer believed there were no disadvantages about being a mechanic in the Army because he liked the work and he was a mechanic in civilian life. He thought it came pretty easy. The one part Mazer did not like was when the regular engineers went out in the fields and the mechanics did not go with them. However, sometimes they did go with the engineers. There were different platoons out there. Mazer was in the 23rd Engineer Battalion. Mazer's main focus about being a mechanic was just trying to do the job right and get everything working well. The easiest job of being a mechanic to Mazer was everything. He did not have too much trouble. The hardest thing about being a mechanic was when the mechanics were in the fields and the vehicles broke down in the dead of winter. The mechanics had to work on the vehicles in the cold. Mazer said it was cold because Germany is like Pennsylvania. A skill that Mazer acquired from his job was more mechanical work. He had to work on tanks that were around 60 tons. They put the engines in, but they did not have to rebuild them. They repaired parts such as transmissions. Besides getting used to his job, Charles Mazer also had to adapt to military life in general. Mr. Mazer did not have any trouble at all adapting to military life.
Though the Army was very physically demanding, Mazer did not get any really bad injuries that he remembers. His time overseas was very different from the American life. He had no. Mazer had slept in the Concern, a big building with 10 to 15 others in their own private room. Mazer had also mentioned that he did not really think about anything before going to sleep, since he was a mechanic. His main focus was just to sleep, wake up, and keep on working on each vehicle to its full extent. Throughout, Mazer said he did not really miss any foods from home. Germany made the same types of food as America did: bacon, eggs, roast beef, and sausage. Mazer did have a favorite meal though. It was called Wiener Schnitzel, but he could only get it when they went out to the towns. He enjoyed the meals over there and said it could quite easily be the best meals he had ever eaten in his. Mazer was not home for holidays, but he did have particularly enjoyable times. His most memorable memories were having fun times on New Year's Eve, going out on dates, and just hanging out with the guys. The guys he became friends with were Southern. He had mentioned that the two Southern guys liked to have fun and play games with people. He told stories about just lifting cars onto the curbs and funny games they played on people. Those memories made will be something he will never forget. Mazer indicated that outside of being a mechanic, he was also assigned kitchen police until he was a high enough rank that he did not have to do it. He had that extra job for about a year or so. He explained it as a terrible job that all you did was wash the same dishes 3 times a day, peel potatoes, and clean the whole kitchen till it was spotless. The Army was very clean, so everything had to be done perfect, Mazer told us. He did not like this job one bit and was very glad when it was over. Mazer was very glad to return home with multiple lessons learned from being over in Germany.
Anything you found like shocking about the Vietnam War? Like anything that surprised you that happened?
Not really about war, no. I don't. Everything that happened there, just that common war. I don't think
Mhm.
there's anything. Maybe the napalm they used on those people. That was in Agent Orange.
Mhm.
Because they killed a lot of people with that vegetation
Mhm.
and a lot of animals too. Because imagine if it did that to people. Imagine what it did all the poor animals. So
Yeah.
they have nothing to do with that. I mentioned that. And a lot of people still suffering. There's still mines over there, and people still getting their legs blown off, and the animals are too. I kill all animals. So it was a dumb war. It should never been fought. It should never been fought.
Yeah, it was a long war.
Yeah, it should never been fought. They weren't communist anyway, so what's it matter? So it was one thing it should have been. So that's the only thing I can say.